Good morning or good afternoon. It depends on what class you're in, but this is Miss Cannon, and I'm going to talk to you about ancient Egypt today. So, when we discuss ancient Egypt, it is one of the early river valley civilizations. When we talk about Egypt, you have to understand that Egypt is desert. It's in Africa, it's surrounded by desert, but it has one resource that keeps people living there, which is the Nile River. When we talk about the geography of Egypt, the Nile River flows from south to north, which means the river flows up, okay? Um, One advantage that Egypt has as a civilization is that flooding is predictable, okay? So the people of Egypt know when the flooding was going to occur, so they could plan accordingly with their farming. Um, it allowed for a rich, fertile soil because you have these things like the silt deposits that have nutrients come from the river and fill. Once the river floods, it fills up into the land and gives the land a lot of nutrients. We talked extensively yesterday about how soil has to be very fertile for you to survive and grow and have a good, strong harvest. The Nile River splits into two branches in the north, so it splits to form like a triangle, and it's called a delta. In the delta, there are very fertile silt deposits. And what would happen with even the flooding is that the flooding was very gradual. So that means it didn't like, you didn't wake up the next night and it was like completely flooded. It was a slow, gradual change. And usually the flooding would occur with the summer rains. And it would leave silt in the water, okay, and on the land. If you look here, you can see this is like a satellite photo to the left of the Nile River, and you can see right here, if you look at the top where that green area is, that is your delta, okay? And then if you look on the right, you have more of a map showing you how far the Nile River runs. If you notice on the right map that Egypt will be broken into two areas. You have Upper and Lower Egypt, okay? Upper Egypt is located south of the Delta, okay? And during ancient times, for a very extended period of time, Upper Egypt is politically separated from Lower Egypt. So Egypt is the same area, but it's divided into, and they do not associate with each other politically. And if you look here, this is a map of ancient Egypt, and this shows the most important sites and temples. But right here, to your right, you can see that there's the Upper Egypt area, the Nile River. There's Nubia, which we'll talk about some trading with Nubia. But you can also see that there are many statues and the Colossi and all of these areas right here, and their establishments that they had in Upper Egypt. And this presentation will be on the World History Weebly, so you can definitely go back and look at these pictures a little bit closer. When we talk about Lower Egypt, it's located at the delta. So if you notice, there is a difference between Upper Egypt. They do have a lot of farming along their coast here in this area. But then if you look at the difference between Lower Egypt has extensive grass and land and farming here because all of these areas right here have very fertile silt deposits. If you look, there's hieroglyphics, and then you have the pyramids. Important cities will develop in Lower Egypt. A lot of trading will be done here because this delta leads right out into the Mediterranean Sea, where they can head on to other nations or civilizations and trade. Now, when we talk about trade, they both had surpluses. So a surplus is extra. They had extra. So they had enough to feed themselves, but they also had enough to trade as well. They traded by navigating the Nile River. When we talk about a surplus of food, this word is very important because a surplus of food means that you have an abundance, okay? It allows you to be prosperous, but it also allows you to trade. Trade means you get more money or you get more goods, okay? When we talk about international trade, they will trade with Crete and Syria, okay? They'll get wood from them and ivory from Nubia, and they'll travel along the Red Sea and the Mediterranean and beyond, okay? Merchants would go up and down the river trading to towns and villages along the Nile, but then they would head out into the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea as well. And there are a couple videos in this presentation or maps that your teachers will go back and show you after you get done with the presentation. When we talk about natural barriers, it's exactly what it says it is. A natural barrier is a barrier that is created by nature that allows for protection from attack. So when we talk about Egypt, they have 3 awesome natural barriers. First of all, they have a desert. Most people during this time do not want to come across the desert to fight you and get tired and try to take your stuff and try to take your food and try to dominate over you. It's just too much work. It's just too much work, and they don't have all the technology that people have now, so crossing a desert is not an easy task. They have cataracts, which are blockages in the river. They cause rapids. So, a lot of civilizations and other groups of people in Africa, as well as in any other area that would come to Egypt, did not have necessarily the technology to manage to get down cataracts or to deal with them, even in a little canoe or a little boat. And also the Mediterranean Sea. Many groups of people and civilizations had not figured out how to navigate on an ocean, or even how to create a boat that could fare ocean waves and ocean breezes and things like that. So when we talk about these natural barriers, they protect Egypt. They make Egypt, it's kind of like it's its own personal, it has like fortress, but it's created by nature, so it's protected. And when you talk about China and India, you'll realize that they have natural barriers as well that keep people from attacking or they're just not vulnerable. Okay, when we talk about Egypt, if you look at the map here, you have the Sahara Desert right here. This is the continent of Africa. This is Egypt right here, and you can even see the Nile River. Okay, Spain, this is Europe. This is the Middle Eastern region, Atlantic Ocean right here, and the Indian Ocean. Okay, Mediterranean Sea. That's what the Nile empties into, if you look closely. Now, when we talk about a hierarchy, it's exactly what it says it is. There's a higher, that's what I always remind myself of. It's a higher, somebody's higher than somebody else in the standing of society. So when we talk about society, you need to think of social classes. And you have, at the bottom, the common people and the slaves, the merchants and the artisans, the nobles and the priests, and then last but not least, the pharaoh. When we talk about pharaohs is very important. Pharaohs were considered gods on the earth. So when we discuss this hierarchy of society, all of these people respect this individual, not just because they're a leader, but they also believe that they're a god. Okay? And when we talk about pharaoh, the word means god king. So nobles and priests and merchants and artisans, common people and slaves, all answer to this individual, not only in their belief, not only as a physical being, but also as a spiritual being as well. When we talk about nobles and priests, and you might want to add a little note to your notes, nobles and priests were educated. They could write, they could read. Okay, so when we talk about hierarchies of society, a lot of times what happens is that there's a line drawn between people who were educated, pharaoh, nobles, and priests, and people who maybe were not educated formally, like merchants, artisans, common people, and slaves. Now, you notice that merchants and artisans are higher than common people and slaves on the hierarchy. And that is because merchants and artisans have found a trade. They have a certain skill that they do. They have a way, like merchants trade. Artisans, it's just like what I always tell my students, artisans are like artists. They have a special thing that they are good at, that they create, that is valuable to society, like pottery or weaponry or clothing. They have some type of, if you'd like, in layman's terms, you say some type of hustle that allows them to make money. Merchants are excellent businessmen. They trade, they navigate, they go up and down the Nile and trade amongst villages and towns. Nobles and priests. Nobles are the wealthy upper class. Priests deal with the Egyptian religion. They know they write the text for the hieroglyphics. They are very educated, and they are aware of the gods, and they worship the gods and bring that religion to other Egyptians in society. Just remember, it's all pyramid. It goes up, and the higher you are, the better off you are in society. moving on. We're going to talk about three kingdoms. There's the old, the middle, and the new kingdom. When we talk about the old kingdom, what you need to understand is that originally the old kingdom had different tribes. All of them lived in Egypt, but they were just different tribes that associated with their tribe. By 3100 BC, a dynasty is going to arise. A dynasty is a family of rulers, if you've never heard it, but a dynasty is a family of rulers. So when you have a pharaoh, when he dies, his son takes over, and so on and so on. But Menses is going to lead this first dynasty, and what he decides to do is he is going to unite and consolidate the power of all of Egypt. So there will no longer be Upper and Lower Egypt. There will just be one Egypt, okay? Also, during this time, this is when they begin the construction of the pyramids. Now, kingship was a divine institution. So when we say divine, I want you to think of like God, like divine, like heaven. Divine, it's a term that's used when you talk about religious aspects. And when we talk about these pharaohs, they are God kings on the earth, so their power was given to them by God, which is divine right. They have absolute power. That means it's my way or the highway. You do what I say, what I say goes, okay? Now, a couple things, though. They didn't just rule in an absolutely crazy manner, and they had no rules. Pharaohs had rules. They had set principles. They had to use the ideas of truth, justice, harmony, and right order. And they had to follow those key principles: truth, justice, right order, and harmony, just like everyone else in society. They do not rule alone. Even though they have absolute power, it's a bureaucracy because they have members of their family perform administrative tasks. The vizier, if you see this right here, vizier, he is the steward of the whole land. And he will be a direct advisor to the king. But what you need to really harp on is this word bureaucracy. A bureaucracy is when there is a leader, but he has people that perform outside tasks as well. Because when we talk about leadership, one person cannot do everything by themselves. It's just like with the president. The president of the United States has a cabinet that assists him in decision-making and planning. Eventually what will happen is that Egypt will be divided into provinces led by governors. I always compare it to like states. Like North Carolina has a governor. Governor answers to the president. Like, because the president cannot be everywhere in the whole United States at one time and tell everybody what needs to be done. But he can tell the governors of the state what he thinks should be done, and they can rule and advise and take care of the province or the state as they need to. Okay, and it's the same thing in Egypt. They're going to divide it into provinces and have them led by governors, but these governors will always answer to the pharaoh at the end of the day. Now, Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom will have a more clear defined system of states. So in the Old Kingdom, we start doing the providence state thing, and it's kind of like, we're not sure what we're doing, but we're going to figure it out. But by Middle Kingdom, we got it down. Governors' roles are clearly defined during this time. It's known as a golden age. Anytime you hear golden age in world history, that means that people are living well, okay? They start collecting taxes. When you collect taxes, your government runs more smoothly because you can fund things, you can do different things with the taxes that you collect, and it also helps you maintain your kingdom. Labor forces for royal projects. So we're going to have like the stone quarry now where you have stones so you could do building projects like pyramids and shrines, things like that. Pharaohs actually cared more about the people. There were public works, and there was even a little bit of public welfare, which when you have the collection of taxes, that's going to open up for you to have public programs to assist the community. So Egypt even had some public works and welfare programs going on. Now, Middle Kingdom, when we talk about religion, religion is polytheistic. This is a very important term because it means the belief in many gods. And many gods were associated with natural forces and theocracy. Don't forget that with Egypt, their government is going to be a theocracy. Okay? Their religion's polytheistic. They believe in more than one god. If you hear monotheistic, that means one god. But they're going to believe in many. And they also, their government is ruled with religion, so that's a theocracy. When we talk about technology and innovation, the pyramids were built as burial chambers for pharaohs. So pharaohs die, they go in the tombs inside of a pyramid. That's what they're built for, to honor them. Mummification. The Egyptians are really big on mummification. They mummify the pharaoh's body, and they preserve the body for the afterlife because they believe that Ka will return. He's the soul of the afterlife, and be able to recognize the body. So when we talk about mummification, pharaohs don't go down there by themselves. Everything that the pharaoh owns goes down into the tomb with him when he dies. So that's like gold, that's like clothing, that's like wine, that's also servants. Everyone goes into the tomb for the afterlife because the pharaoh needs you in the afterlife to maintain his kingdom. Record keeping. When we talk about record keeping, remember that record keeping is essential to a civilization because that's how you communicate and deal with things. So there's hieroglyphics and they're pictures. If you look here, you can see the pyramids. There's a queen's chamber, a king's chamber, different shaft areas, and here are where they preserve your certain organs for mummification here in the pyramids. One big thing that they did with the Egyptian pyramids is that they tried to make it not easy to break into. Okay? Not easy. And there are links here, so I know your teacher's going to go back and show you them. When we talk about the New Kingdom, you have the Hyksos, which they came from West Asia, and they end up invading Egypt. Now, with cultural diffusion, the Egyptians learned to use bronze. But the big issue that you need to understand is that the Hyksos are able to take over the Egyptians because the Hyksos have horse-drawn carriages, and the Egyptians are still using donkeys. So what happens is that the Hyksos are able to take over Egypt because they have better what? Do you know? It's better technology. So when we talk about cultural diffusion, the Egyptians will be taken over for about I believe 100 years. And what will happen, though, is that the Hyksos will let the Egyptians learn how to use bronze and create horse-drawn carriages. And eventually the Egyptians are like, oh, heck no, you're not going to take us over anymore. And they take the ideas that they got from the Hyksos and overthrow them and kick them out of Egypt. Now, we're going to talk about pharaohs for a few minutes, and we are almost done. When we talk about pharaohs, you will have a female pharaoh that is well known, and her name is Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was the first female pharaoh, and what happened was that her husband just became deceased, and her son was too young to rule Egypt. So Hatshepsut actually ruled Egypt. She's the first female, and it's very interesting when we talk about Hatshepsut because she actually wore a beard. Why do you think she wore a beard? I'll let you think about it for like a second. Hatshepsut wore a beard because she wanted to establish herself as a strong figure in Egypt. She's first female. She set out a military and trading expedition, so she was very big on building up her military to establish her presence because Hatshepsut already knew that becoming a female pharaoh that she would have the odds against her. People would want to attack Egypt, take her over. And she also was very big on trading relations. She encouraged mining in Egypt. Also, she fostered the growth of agriculture. So she was like, hey, we need to expand on farming even more because farming equals trading. Trading equals money and wealth for our community. And then another pharaoh that you have is Ramses II. Ramses II is really big on control of Palestine. And what he's going to do is that for a while, when Egypt is taken over, Egypt loses their relations in other areas, such as Palestine. Like, because when you're a civilization, you can expand, and you can expand your horizons and take over more land. And when Egypt was taken over by the Hyksos, then they lost Palestine. But Ramses II is going to regain control of Palestine and even restore more power to Egypt. So after they've been invaded and they kick the groups of people out, Ramses helps Egypt gain more power. Now, later on, though, and actually I'll let you look at this map. If you look here, you have Egypt's rule under Ramses II, so you can see all the light brown here. The Hittite Empire is right up here above that. You can see Troy's here. You have Syria and the Arabian Desert. There's the Euphrates, so you know this area is Mesopotamia. But you can see the max of the Egyptian rule. See this dotted line here. So they had expanded out that far. Okay. When we talk about the decline of the Egyptian civilization, it was invaded by the Sea People. There is no like. They don't know what the true name of the Sea People were. It destroyed their control in Palestine, so Egypt lost their control in Palestine. It ended in 1070. Later, Egypt will be dominated by several groups of people. The Libyans, the Nubians, the Persians, and finally the Macedonians under Alexander the Great, which you will learn about another day. He's a great man, haha. And later in the 1st century, Egypt will become a province. Province was like a state of Rome, so they'll belong to Rome later. If you have any questions about this video, please pause it. You can rewind it or fast forward it, but I hope you enjoy it. And make sure you can go back and watch these videos. Have a wonderful day.